Hi and welcome back to the course. In this video we're going to continue with our project, or in fact actually start our project, and make sure that we match the API endpoints that we decided in the last video. So we had a couple of endpoints, some related to item and some related to items, and in this video we're going to be creating the item resource. I mentioned earlier that these resources normally are stored in a database. For this section, we're not going to use a database, we're going to introduce that in the next section. In this section, we're going to introduce Flask-RESTful and authentication. So in the next section, we'll look at databases. For now, we're going to use an in-memory database, which is just a Python list. And I'm going to just create a sort of list called items. And this is going to contain a dictionary for each item, just as we did in the last section. Then I'm going to rename my resource to be item, just so it makes a bit more sense. And also remember to rename it down here as well. And also to rename it there. Now I'm going to delete this comment because it no longer makes sense. However, we're still going to access items the very same way, only it's going to be /item/item name. Now, we're going to need to get items and also to be able to create items. We're going to start with those two capabilities. And we're going to add the ability to modify items and delete items just a bit later. So the get method has some code there. We're going to change that in a moment. And the post method has to have exactly the same method signature. That is the same set of parameters. That is because when we access /item/item name, that name is going to come to be name here. So even though this request is going to have a JSON payload, some data sent in through JSON, and we could send the name on that JSON file as well, we are not going to do that. We are going to instead receive it through the URL, so all of these things can be accessed with the same endpoint, just changing the HTTP verb. That makes things just a lot easier. Okay, in order to create items, it's very simple. We're going to start without even looking at the JSON. We're going to start by saying item is equal to a name, which is the parameter, and a price, which I'm going to hardcode to 12, say. Now, how do we add this item to our items list? I'm sure you know how to do that. Hopefully you got it right. The way to do that is to do items.append, and then the item there. And what that'll do is that'll put this dictionary as one of the elements in this list at the very end of the list. And when we do that again, it'll put another element at the end and so on. Finally, we also want to tell the client, in this case Postman, but it could be a mobile app or a web app, that we have processed this addition, that we have created this item and added it to our database, in this case our list. In order to do that, we're going to just return item so that the application knows that this has happened. Okay, now I would like to test this out, see if it works, but unfortunately it's not really possible without implementing the get method. So let's do that as well. Get is going to look in this list and retrieve an item that matches the name that has been requested. I think that with that explanation, you should be able to do that already. All it has to do is iterate over this list and return the appropriate item. I'm sure you got that. What to do is say for item in items, if item name equals the name, return item. Remember, item is going to be a dictionary, so that's just going to get returned. And I forgot to mention, we no longer need to do JSONify when talking with Flask-RESTful, because Flask-RESTful does it for us, so we can just return dictionaries. That's probably evident by now, but nevertheless, thought I should mention that. Okay, so now we've got two working endpoints, and what we have to do is just try it out to make sure it works, really. So let's open up a terminal that we've got here, and I am going to go and cancel that and run it again. Then let's go over to, not this one, but Postman. And we're going to use the endpoints that we've already created. So the first thing to do is to create a new item. And this item has a body, but we're not using that in our code, and that's fine. Even though it has a body, we don't have to use it. So we're going to leave the body and the content type as it is, with the knowledge that it's not getting used. And then we are going to create a chair. So let's send. Notice that what we get back is a dictionary that contains the price and the name. The price is hard-coded to 12, and it's coming back as an integer, as opposed to a float. That's fine in this case, it doesn't really matter. And the name is a chair there. Now, this should also have added the item, the chair, to our items database. So let's go and retrieve the chair and see if that does come out. And as you can see, now we are getting the chair and it's coming out with the price 12 as well. So what does this tell us? It tells us that what we've implemented here is correct. So therefore, we are able now to move forwards. There's a couple of things I would like to improve, just as a matter of making things slightly better, which is what happens if we don't find the item with a specific name. Well, here's what would happen right now if we do something like piano. Null. Now, for those of you that remember what I mentioned earlier about JSON always having to be a dictionary, this is not valid JSON. Postman is accepting it because Postman is really, really good. But there are many other libraries like AngularJS which may not accept this. So instead of returning just null, which is what this method returns, as we know, all Python methods return none by default, what we have to do is change that return none to be something like item is none. Now, this is essentially the same thing, but now we have to restart, of course. But now when we do this, we get a valid JSON representation of this thing. Another thing, the status code is 200 OK, but evidently things are not OK because we were not able to find the item. So what to return in this case? I'm sure you know it if you remember it from one of the presentations. That's right. The error code for not found is 404. This is a common interview question as well. What's the most popular HTTP status code? And the most popular is not 404, it is 200. So make sure to not fall into the trap. Let's restart the app and press again. And now we get item is null, 404 not found. Awesome. I think our get endpoint is now working. Something else to remember is that creating also has its own HTTP status code. And maybe you remember which one that is. Hopefully you did. It's very similar to 200 OK. 200 OK is for when the server just kind of returns some data and says, everything's OK, I've given you what you wanted. 201 is for created. So when we go ahead and restart the app again, and then go back to Postman and create the chair, now we get back 201 created, which means the object has been created and it has been added to the database. Notice there is also a very similar status code called 202, which is accepted. And the accepted code is when you are delaying the creation. For example, if creating the object takes a long time, you may say, I'm going to create this object, return 202, and the object gets created then after 5 or 10 minutes. The client doesn't have to wait 5 or 10 minutes, but it knows that you have accepted the creation of that. It may then fail, but that's out with the client's control. So hopefully all of that makes sense. Using the right status codes is very important because it is a very quick way of clients like web applications or mobile applications, to check whether things went wrong or not. And in this case, if we get a 404, we don't even need to check the payload because we know that nothing's coming back that we're really interested in. If 201 comes back, then we should check the payload to see what has been created. That's everything for this video. In the next one, we're going to be implementing the item list, which I'm sure you can do that already, just with the knowledge that we've got now. I'll give you a hint. We're going to have to create a new resource, so you can give that a go before the next video. I'll see you there.